Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So today I want us to talk about the danger of a single story. That's what we're going to discuss today. The danger of a single story. Now, this is a reaction video to Adichie. She's an author. I believe she's also a professor as well. And she gave a talk at Oxford University. I believe it was in 2009. And the name, TED Talk, and the name of it was The Danger of a Single Story. So I'm going to react to that, basically break that down and give you my perspective about that TED Talk. You can look it up on YouTube as well. It's there. I think it's a really good TED Talk. And also, it's used in a lot of classrooms. You know, a lot of professors use it in college classrooms. People use it for workshops. I know I personally have used it and still use it in my college classrooms. So it is something that a lot of people turn to when they're trying to talk about stereotypes and mindset and all that sort of stuff. So let's just jump straight into it. So in this video, she tells a story, her personal story about her upbringing and all that, to talk about the dangers of a single story. So what is a single story? Now, the single story is one that is created by stereotypes, right? So think of it. The single story is one that is created by stereotypes. Now, in her talk, she mentions a family, and she mentioned that her parents, they were, I guess, middle class, and they had help, right? So they had family help. And so the boy that worked for them, or at least one of the people that worked for them, his name was Fide. And so she mentions that the only thing she had ever heard about Fide's family is that they were poor. Now, see where I'm going with the single story. The only thing that she had ever heard about Fide's family is that they were poor. And so the only perception that she had of them was one of poverty, right? And so she came to see them as being nothing but poor, because the only story that she had heard repeatedly over and over and over and over again about Fide and his family was one of poverty. And so she could only see them through her eyes as being poor. And so that is how you create the single story, right? You mention something, you say it over and over and over and over again, and that is who that person becomes, or those people become, or that place becomes. So it's like, for example, if you were to say that all people are like this, and you put all people from a certain group specifically are like this, and if that is repeated over and over and over again, then the tendency for people to think is that this is who these people are. So if we're to say that all white people are like this, or all black people are like this, or all Hispanics, Latinos are like that, all Asians are like that, all men are like it, all women are like it, all gay people are like that, all straight people are like that, all Christians are like that, all Muslims are like that. If we're to repeat those things over and over and over again, right, and put a stereotype to that person, that place, that thing, what Adichie is saying is that is who then that person, that place, or that thing becomes, because we're telling this same story about them over and over and over again. So what it does is it's a whole idea of perception. Obviously, it starts with perception. So someone sees someone as poor. They know, yes, financially they're poor, but what they didn't mention to her, and she talks about this in her talk, is that they are poor, but they are hardworking, right? And she only realized that they were hardworking when she interacted with them. So that's the thing about this whole idea of stereotypes. You know, stereotypes create mindlessness, and that is something that I would discuss in a completely separate video. But these perceptions of people create stereotypes, and then these stereotypes are driven by people telling multiple stories about this person, this place, or this thing. And then a number of people now would have a tendency to want to believe that that is how this person is, unless they have interacted with them. So she talks about interaction as being a key thing to being able to defeat the whole narrative of the single story. Now, the single story obviously creates stereotypes, and in that she mentions it's not that stereotypes are necessarily always untrue. It is that they are incomplete, right? So it's not that stereotypes are always, untrue. It is just that a lot of times stereotypes are incomplete. So yes, the stereotype is maybe someone lives in a certain community and they are poor because of that's what you associate maybe with people who live in that community. But what the stereotype doesn't do is it doesn't explain the individual circumstances and situation of a person. It doesn't tell you that this person is poor, but yet they're talented. And so if you only approach the person from the mindset of poverty, then maybe you don't interact with them at all, because then with that mindset of poverty, you start thinking other negative things about them. Well, if they're poor, well, maybe they do this. Or if they're poor, then they're not hardworking. Or if they're poor, well, that is not the case. The person could be poor, but they could very much be willing to get out of their situation if given the chance. But you have to be able to open your mind to look beyond the fact that, well, maybe they are poor. And see, that's the thing with stereotypes, is it prevents us from getting to know people when we just operate on the premise of the stereotype. She talks about how the single story flattens someone's experience, and it really does, right? The flattening of an experience. And if you think about it, there are so many different things that make us who we are. Now, I also grew up poor. And I would tell you honestly, growing up, I did have teachers who would approach me from the perspective that I was poor, right? And there was this expectation that I wouldn't do anything significant in my life. I wouldn't go to one of the best schools as some of my friends would, right? I wouldn't get to go to one of the better high schools or whatever the case is. And the funny thing about that too is when people see you as poor and people then don't expect a lot from you because they're poor, because a lot of times we associate poor financially with poor mentally, and they're completely different things, but a lot of times we put them together. So when people see you as poor and then they try to associate that with your ability, your other abilities, then they have a tendency sometimes to want to look down at you and not expect a whole lot from you. And from a teaching perspective, I would say that I did have teachers who didn't expect a whole lot from me because I was poor. And then what happens to the crazy thing is you could then start to develop the mindset of poverty, right? Not just that you're financially poor, but if you're not careful, you start developing that mindset that, well, I'm poor, so that means I'm not supposed to do anything with my life. And some people think like that. That's how it works, right? I've had the opportunity to counsel so many people. And a lot of times on a weekly basis, I do this. And if you talk to people, is you realize how we can internalize our surroundings and our situations and make and help and use that to turn us into the very thing we may not want to become. So it really does flatten your experience because it robs people of their dignity, because every single person is different and no one single story necessarily defines you. She also talks about how the single story, if you're not careful, could become your definitive story. In other words, people could label you, and that's what the story really does. It labels you because it's been told over and over and over and over and over again. So it labels you, and then if you're not careful, it becomes that defining story of you. And then people see you as just that one thing. You have that label on you. And so you have to be really careful about who you let label you, because you are really supposed to define you for yourself. You're not supposed to have anyone else define you. And so you've got to be careful of the labels that people put on you, the names that people call you, or whatever the situation is, because a lot of the labeling has to do with power. She talks about power, nakale. And so she talks about that, which is an Igbo word, I believe she said, a noun for power, and how people who are powerful, by them saying something over and over and over again, because they have a big megaphone, right, a big microphone, because they have a bigger audience, that they could say something over and over and over again, and they could label you. Right? You could see this in different things, whether it's in politics is especially a place where you'd see stuff like that, where people could repeat something over and over and over again, to the point where other people start believing it, and it's not true. But because of the megaphone that someone has, a lot of times they're able to almost turn that negative story into your definitive story, and that is not even you, right? And so that's something you always have to be careful of. It's not to be, don't allow yourself to be limited by the story that other people tell of you. Instead, be defined by the stories that you choose to tell of yourself, by the life that you live. Don't let other people define you. And so that's why she says it robs you of your dignity, of your uniqueness, right? That could become your definitive story, the story that someone else tells of you. So power is a key thing in that. So just to kind of to sum it up, the single story, remember, it creates that mindset. All right. It's a story, it's a stereotype that's been told over and over and over again that creates that single story. And if you're not careful, when people start to label you and call you a certain thing, you might start to believe it. You internalize it. Some people do it. They hear it, I'm poor, well, maybe I'm not supposed to do anything, or maybe I'm not supposed to be educated. I'm not supposed to go to college. I'm not supposed to do this. I'm not supposed to be successful. I'm not, because I'm poor. Because look at the neighborhood I grew up in, or look at the home I come from, or and if you internalize that, that could be a real problem. So I really love Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story. As I said, it's on YouTube. It's a TED Talk. Please take the opportunity to look at it, and you can draw your own perspective from it. But I just wanted to shed some light on it, because I think it's really powerful how the danger of a single, in terms of the danger of a single story, could help to shape you. And I think it's key that you never let anyone define you for you. You have to be able to define yourself and not be subject to anyone else's single story of you. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch again. I know you could be looking at anyone else, so I thank you for taking the time to spend some time with me. And please don't forget to subscribe, turn on your post notifications. Please leave your comments, and don't forget to like and share the video. And until next time, peace.